a lot of this on the country we're in and on the Greek experience. Historically, marine mammals are embedded in Greeks' deep connection with the sea. For Greeks, they were considered sacred symbols. Dolphins act as a passage between life and death. The symbolism of the dolphin is closely related to the basic stages of human existence. There is evidence of a deeper link between the stages of life, death, and rebirth, and the ability of the dolphin to move between the world of people breathing air with lungs and the world under the waves of the sea, which for the ancient Greeks could easily have been associated with the world of the dead. In the myth of Arion, Herodotus writes that Arion was carried into the sky riding on the back of a dolphin and was given three stars as gifts from the gods. This constellation, of course, now is known as the Orion's Belt. Dolphins were associated with morality and honor. The close alignment between humans and dolphins meant that ancient Greeks actually held dolphins in extremely high regard, and that killing a dolphin was equal to killing a person. Both crimes, in fact, were sentenced with death. It was Aristotle, as Giuseppe said yesterday morning, in Historia Animalium, who made his first reference to cetaceans, while the term, of course, cetaceans itself originates from the ancient Greek kytos. In their book on monk seals in antiquity, Johnson and Levine present many findings that suggest monk seals played an important role in the Mediterranean civilizations, influencing, in fact, aspects of their culture, their myths, their economy, their medicine, and their science. In Homer's Odyssey is the first reference, actually, to monk seals in ancient literature. In the Odyssey, the seals were described as the brood of the lovely child of the ocean. Odysseus, on his journey back to Ithaca, sails his ship past the island of Sirens, and lying on the rocks, these sirens would sing out to the sailors, drawing the ships and the sailors to their doom. Could this be the siren song that some colleagues in this room may have actually heard from monk seals? Although monk seals were placed under the protection of Apollo and Poseidon, the research of Johnson and Levine actually indicates that this did not suffice to save them from killing or exploitation, especially during the Roman era. Overall, however, it seems that marine mammals were an important part of Greek civilization and were indeed valued greatly. Now, as we move from the ancient times to the present-day situation, the obvious question is, what value do we actually attach to these marine mammals? Now, for a country like Greece, I would firstly argue that relatively little is known about marine mammals. And where such knowledge does exist, their presence is, to a large extent, either taken for granted, considered a luxury topic in times of crisis, or even an expendable entity in search for short-term profit. In market research carried out in Greece in 2011, 85% of respondents indicated they had little information on endangered marine mammals. Now, this number must have changed since then. I'm sure it's a lower number, thanks to a lot of the work, I think, of the conservation community, but it hasn't changed, I would say, dramatically. In more recent market research, commissioned by Demetres, only a few months ago, in fact, while over 75% of respondents understood that oil and gas drilling was associated with negative impacts on marine mammals, only 34% believed that oil and gas drilling should stop because of negative environmental impacts. In other words, this proportion of respondents were willing to overlook potential loss of biodiversity, including marine mammals, in search of oil and gas reserves and a perceived brighter future. Despite their role as symbols of marine biodiversity, their systematic study in Greece began many centuries later. And essentially, marine mammal conservation in Greece has a history of roughly 3 decades, initiated by a small group of scientists who, to this date, are still active primarily through NGOs and universities in research, awareness building, and advocacy work. And we're pleased to say that a number of these scientists are actually with us in this conference, from the older generation, but also from the younger generation. I'm sure you can recognize this young lady who is, the photo is from a ACOBAM survey that took place this summer with participation of many international and Greek experts. As we move away from the past and look into the present, and more importantly, into the future, what value do we place on these magnificent creatures? And more importantly, what needs to change so that marine mammals continue to exist in the centuries to come? How do we ensure that they are valued as significant parts of our sea's health, taking advantage of this symbolism, strong connection, which is important not only to nature conservation, but to Greek identity as well? So, in a nutshell, what needs to happen? Firstly, we need to tell the stories. We, that is civil society, the scientific community, managers, practitioners, must find a way to share the stories about these animals in ways and with methods that people, and especially youth, can understand and relate to. We cannot love nor protect that which we do not know. So now is the time to begin to really make their presence known, their problems, their plight, their beauty. Now is the time for society at large and in countries such as Greece to recognize the inherent or intrinsic value of these animals, to understand their relationship with our history and culture, to turn them into a part of our national identity for which we feel both pride and moral responsibility to future generations. Value can be of an intrinsic nature. It goes, of course, without saying that it can also have an obvious economic dimension. The whale watching industry on a global scale is generating something like $2 billion in revenue annually and supporting roughly 13,000 to 15,000 jobs. Now, without compromising the overriding need to effectively conserve, we must foster an appreciation for marine mammals in ways that generate tangible benefits to local communities, create jobs, and ultimately associate the well-being of people to the presence and healthy status of marine mammals. We cannot shy away from the challenges. We need to find common ground and work with local communities and stakeholders to resolve conflicts on critical issues such as interaction with fisheries. We heard a lot about this in yesterday's session, and in Greece we've known for years that one of the greatest threats to the survival of the Mediterranean monk seal stems from its interaction with fisheries, either in the form of entanglement in fishing gear or deliberate killing. Now, the conservation community in this country has studied this relationship. We've quantified the conflict. We've elaborated proposals. We must now focus our efforts on adoption and implementation of these proposals. Similarly, in the growing sector of shipping, we must do more to look for solutions, to mitigate and effectively address the risk of ship strikes and underwater noise. And I think we already heard in the session some very, very good examples of places where this conflict has been overcome, and I think we have a lot to learn from that. On the potential and importance of marine protected areas, I don't think I need to say much. I'm preaching to the choir here, for sure, but I do think that what is, however, important is that we recognize we must move much quicker in turning the science into management, as we heard yesterday, turning the information into designation, implementable management plans agreed with stakeholders and fundable to scale, making paper parks a thing of the past. Here in Greece, working together with many other partners over the last 5 years, all the groundwork has been done to establish Yaros as a marine protected area, critical for the local population of the Mediterranean monk seal. Now, we need to proceed with the next important steps: formal designation by the government, implementation, and replication. On a global scale, but also in the Mediterranean, a great deal of work has gone into the IMAs. We heard so much about this yesterday. But again, now is the time to focus on adoption and implementation on the water. Over the next few months, the international policy arena may offer important opportunities, such as the CBD process, that we must be prepared to capitalize on. Marine mammals may in fact be an important element of these discussions and may assist in driving these targets forward. Now, at the same time, there are those very alarming and negative developments where we simply need to hold our ground. My colleague Demetres Karavellas told us about this yesterday, and we had a special session on this. The strategic choice of the Greek government and a handful of large oil companies to miss out on the opportunities for clean energy, to ignore the climate crisis, and to turn the Hellenic Trench, one of the most important areas for marine mammals in the entire region, into a massive oil drilling ground is complete madness. We must openly challenge this choice and spare no effort in convincing those who decided this path of the very real risks, but also the more sustainable alternatives. And in this context, let me thank you, those of you who have already signed our declaration, and urge you to spread the word with your colleagues back home. Stay close to this ongoing campaign effort. The international scientific community needs to make its voices heard, so they cannot say they did not know. So, in wrapping up, do we think mankind will value marine mammals through the centuries and in those to come? It's not easy to say, but we must be hopeful and optimistic. And that hope and optimism must find its roots in bold and collective action. While many are inspired to these days by the teaching of ancient Greeks and the value that was placed on marine mammals, value is not the taken. The value of these magnificent creatures must be upheld, it must be defended, and it must be kept alive for themselves and for the generations to come. Thank you.